My name is Ralph Cortese. I'm a manager of a facility for storage units. I run Stroke Warrior Radio, and I also volunteer with Stroke Awareness Oregon. Before I had my stroke, I was a pretty successful, at the time, contractor. I had a huge contract with a summer camp, remodeling all the cabins, and I was doing great. I did 2 porches that week and 2 roofs by myself. I came home Friday and fell asleep on the couch, and all of a sudden I woke up with this miserable headache and I couldn't walk. My whole left side was just totally gone. I couldn't use it. My family is, my background's New Jersey, street kid, pretty much. I'm the oldest of 6 children, 5 boys and 1 girl. I'm very responsible. I started working when I was 12 years old, giving my father my paycheck every week to help out. Played football, wrestled, weightlifted, baseball, whatever I could do. We always were involved. My mom was real sick when I was young, so I also learned how to cook, do laundry and everything for all of us. I used to iron my father's police shirts and polish his police shoes to a spit shine when I was no more than 8 or 9 years old. So it was a pretty cool upbringing. And after that, I moved to Arizona, got married, and had 4 wonderful children. Oh man, I started working at my uncle's electrical supply house in the summers. But that's when I started at 12 and 13 years old. I went out plumbing with my father. So besides a cop, he was also a plumber. So I started plumbing with him when I was 8. I think I sweated my first plumbing joint when he was 10 years old. So it was a lot. I was working all the time. I did the summer things during football and wrestling season and my high school years. I worked at an old department store. Started as a stock boy and wound up as an assistant manager in the furniture department, sales. So I did that for a long time. That was incredibly fun. Then I just moved out back to Arizona because my family had moved there. So I came out there and began a sales career in insurance. So I did that for a number of years. And then I wound up just going back to contracting, plumbing, doing remodeling, those kind of things from then on. I've done a couple things in between. I was a temporary employment vice president for a company when I moved to the Poconos back east. That's where I'm from, so I wanted to go sort of back home. And I wound up moving to the Poconos in Pennsylvania. And that's where I restarted my contracting business. And I was busy right away. So I was always busy. I also even worked a part-time job over at Lowe's up in Matamoros, Pennsylvania. And I was doing well. I mean, the part-time job, I had probably quit 3 months before my stroke. And then I was doing all contracting. I was so busy. I mean, I had so many clients at the time. It was a lot of remodel stuff. So it was a lot of fun. And a week of my stroke, I just was working my butt off. I had deadlines to meet, and I was doing well. I was doing really well. Physically, mentally, I was excited. I was doing awesome. Then it hit. So I had 3 of my daughters in Arizona. My son was also, had moved to Oregon several years earlier. So my 3 children were all over the country. So, and they have, of course, 11 of my grandchildren between them. So it was pretty good kids. I got up early. I was doing great. I was excited about the day because I was wrapping up the porches and the roofs that I did that week. So it was really a busy day ahead of me. But I was excited because, of course, I was finishing up sections of the job, so I was getting paid too. That was part of it. But it was great. I worked about 9 hours that day, came home, felt pretty good, sat down and watched my news at night with a nice tea, and fell asleep. That's the day, pretty much. I worked a lot that day. I mean, I unloaded wood. I did all kinds of stuff that day. I was nailing. I was building. It's crazy. And no indication of any problems. I watch my news with my iced tea like I did every night. This night I fell asleep because it was a very busy week. I did a lot that week. You know, the roofs and the porch were just the big parts of it. I did a whole lot of other things. And I fell asleep. You know, I woke up. I had a miserable headache. I couldn't walk. I didn't know what the heck was going on. So I took some ibuprofen and went to bed. I didn't know it was a stroke. And the next morning I woke up and the whole left side wouldn't work. So I got my phone and checked it out and what a stroke was, and it looked like stroke symptoms. And I called an ambulance. So that was an unfortunate first incident with the ambulance, because they asked me, do you want to go to the hospital? And I said, no, who wants to go to the hospital? Do I have to? And knowing what I know now, this guy, I have better choice words for him, but this guy told me, well, no, you've already had your stroke, so you'll be fine. And they left. And 2 hours later, I called another ambulance because I couldn't move. Everything was so bad on my left side that, I mean, I was dragging and at points crawling on the floor to get around. Second ambulance came. I was waiting outside for him with my bag packed for the hospital. I crawled around the bedroom, packed the bag, went out there and sat on the porch and waited for him. And they took me to the hospital. And next thing I remembered, because I think I kind of blacked out, because the next thing I remember is some doctor yelling "Code Purple." So in the hospital at St. Moses, I think it was, I don't remember the name of the hospital, but it was in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So we had about an hour drive from where I lived. I lived on a lake with a 356-acre lake and a cabin in the woods. It was awesome. It was so spectacular. And I got immediately put in a hospital. It was too late to get that drug that they give for blood thinning, because I did it last night. So by 11 o'clock in the morning, I was in the hospital in the ICU.
What was the feeling of kind of? What was the? Were you scared?
Oh, I was. Yeah,
Like,
I can tell you the feelings that day.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little
Yeah.
more? Like you said, miserable headache. Like, so what is that like? Was it like a regular headache, just worse, or like?
It was like a migraine. The headache I had that night was like a migraine, and it really hurt so much I couldn't hold my head up straight because my neck hurt so bad. So that was a real difficult understanding that. And the next morning, even in a hospital, I still didn't understand, even though I looked at online to see what a stroke was and all the symptoms, I still didn't understand what was happening to me. You know, when I finally saw a doctor that afternoon, they had sent me in for MRIs and CTs and all that. But when I finally saw a doctor in that afternoon, guess what the first thing I said to him was, when can I go back to work? So, yeah. So he was optimistic, but not. You know, you've had a stroke, it's not going to be the same anymore. I was pretty angry at that point, because then the attendings came in, and they were extremely pessimistic, extremely. And I got very angry at them, because here's my neurologist optimistic, a guy with 30 years experience, and these, you know, young interns, or whatever they call them, were, you know, giving me the worst case scenario.
Why is that? What's up with that?
Back then, I think there was not as much understanding or education about stroke recovery. I think one of the things I've learned over the years is, well, and I just learned this one last week. Another caregiver actually explained to me that I was angry at the doctors because they couldn't give me enough information. I don't think they had enough information, first off. Secondly, he said to me, "You're fine now. You're alive. He has other patients that are dying. I need to go see them." You know, so that was, hard time at the time. Not accepting the fact that I'm not going back to work, and not accepting the fact that, in 6 months they told me it's going to be about as good as it gets. Whatever you do to recover. So, I don't accept that. I mean, I almost broke my neck once, and I was back playing football 2 weeks later in high school. So I'm not that type of person. I don't have limits, and I don't expect anybody else to put them on me either. So my daughter came the next day. I started physical therapy immediately, which was very difficult. 4 people had to pull me up, hold me, balance me, cajole me to stand up. And they immediately put me in a wheelchair. We played with that for an hour or two, and then I said, "Look, I've got to get me something to walk with." So they got me a walker, and I started with a walker. But that was a tough period because my daughter was there, and every time we went walking, I was embarrassed for her. Here's this half a man. I'm supposed to take care of her, not her take care of me, and it was real difficult for both of us. She'd go out after we came back in the room and come back still shaking, and you could tell she was crying. I was crying, scared to death. So that was a very difficult time. I think what happened to me in the beginning, actually, is I got so angry about the lack of information we were getting that I fought even harder. And I could have been my own worst enemy because I fought against going to inpatient rehab. I wanted to go home, and I fought that. So I worked extra hard at physical therapy for the first week so I could go home. And I found out once home that I can improve just by doing what I normally did. Unfortunately, it was much slower than I normally did it. I mean, I prepared for a yard sale because my daughter had told me, "Dad, you really can't stay here alone. You're going to have to, we have the room and the way, and we can do it. Help you by you moving in with us for a while." So she left a few days later, and I started to sell off my possessions, including all my tools from my contracting business. And that was tough. It was like I was selling myself. I sold everything. And frankly, it took me 2 weeks to get the yard sale set up, which would have taken me a day in the past. But it took me 2 weeks with the walker and, all kinds of wheel stuff and that kind of thing. And then 2 weeks later, I was packed and I drove out to Colorado Springs because it was my left side. I figured, what the heck, I drive with my right. So, I was stubborn. So a lot of that may have hindered some of my recovery, but a lot of it also helped it. In the beginning, there were, as far as ups and downs, there were no ups. I mean, the only up I had was I woke up every morning. I wasn't dead. And a lot of people would stroke or die. I didn't. So that was